There it is.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome. So on the agenda, we have a list of updates and then some discussion items. First item on the updates is number of issues and PRs. So this is something I mentioned last time. I think all of us developers should go and look at the issues and select the one that we created and see if some of them needs to be deleted or passed on to someone else or something. Because I think once you started pushing a couple hundred issues, it's easy to lose track of many of the earlier ones, right? They're not visible in your face. They just, you forget about them. So I think we should try to prune that tree and rather have people reopen new issues if it wasn't dealt with. Because if it sits in the issue queue for couple of years, then it's sort of lame, right? Then clearly there's no activity on that issue. The PRs, because that's much lower, we have still a bunch of old VIP kind of pull requests there that maybe we should look at and see if we should do something about those. So we'll kind of mention these things at each meeting to just keep track of, if this is getting out of hand or if we have control on all those numbers. So that's what that's about. And then a NAS proposal. So the last month or so, we've, especially Megan and I, but all of us, sort of been busy with getting the proposal done and submitted, which was yesterday. So this meeting is coming very quickly after being consumed by other things. So there's not a whole lot of new things that happen immediately. The proposal got sent in. We won't hear for probably 4 to 6 months, depending on how quick NASA is doing the review during COVID. They were slow last year, so it might be slow this year. So that's okay. So now we can move forward, and we have things we want to do before we release 6.2. Key one is the GMT themes branch that we're going to try to wrap up and merge in, and that'll be a key thing for GMT 6.2. Megan, you want to say anything about the themes branch, where we are and what we need to do before we can wrap it up?
Sure. The main remaining issue is related to the test. So because a lot of the plotting parameters have changed from the defaults, especially any test scripts that use modern mode, if they'll fail. And so that number is at about 263. And back in June, Paul had looked through all of the tests, and in December, I re-looked through them since some major changes had made, and there were about 33 that required further investigation. And that's because they were primarily dependent on some of the automatic positioning. So things like legend or PS scale were not minor changes, such that some of the legend text would now go outside of the legend. And we really don't want that in any of our examples or tests. So that subset of the tests will require some work in either setting specific parameters in the test script or adjusting the scaling in the new themes auto scaling functionality. So that's predominantly it. We also have not forgotten about Christoph's comment regarding the secondary axes. So that's the second main issue that needs to get tackled before it's ready to be merged.
Yeah. Good, great. Yeah. So I remember those issues that were sort of not obvious why they crashed, why they failed. So we need to look at those. I'm guessing we'll maybe do some branches on those tests to keep track of it, and split the load maybe, and people can look at some individual ones. They're usually not super hard to figure out. It's just, when you're looking at 200, it gets a little overwhelming.
The one other thing to mention with the test is that there was the conversation, it got split into a separate issue about whether to update all the PostScript files, which will bloat the repository size a little bit more, move them outside that. And Paul's comment was that we should really just update them in that repo. And if we decide to move the test outside, do that in a later date. So if anyone wants to veto that, now is the time to bring it up.
Yeah, I wanted to say something that is also related to that, because 200 tests is going to wait quite a lot in our repo size. But can we just add in the code, it doesn't even need to be public, an option that the tests will still be run with classic theme, and then add the 1 or 2 or 3 ones needed for testing the auto scalings and the auto stuff. And then you would not be dependent of figuring out what's happening with the 200.
Yeah, most of the tests
and updating 200 postscripts, because that's a lot. You should clean the repo. The repo is too big, and most is script.
Yeah, one of the problems is that we rely on the examples and cookbooks for tests, and so if all the examples are, this was a comment that Dong Dong made, and I'm just repeating, if all the examples are using modern mode, we want people to be able to copy those commands and see the results identically, and so to force it to plot as if in classic mode for the docs and the examples, I agree with that comment that it would not be the best idea. And that is more than half of the PostScript files that would need updating.
Well, it's a small interruptions in the connection, but I think I followed. Yes, that I don't know, many of them we have reproducing exactly things on the cookbook.
Well, this goes back to the bigger issue of, if the test suite greatly increases over the years, we use that to keep bugs under control. At some point, we really just need to bite the bullet and then move the tests out of the source repo, I think, somehow, so that doesn't have to be so bloated for everybody. Just the people who need to know can download the test suite and run those things, because the common user has no particular interest in having to worry about that. But I think the rest of us, we do need to have that ability, and especially those other bugs. They're the kind of bugs that we introduced in a sense, right? That we need to correct.
By the way, I cannot run the tests till the end now, since a couple of weeks. I don't know if it is a specific test or a number of tests, but when it reaches between 6 or 7 to finish, it hangs my shell, and I have to kill the shell because I cannot recover it anymore. So I don't run the test, all the tests, some of 6 or 7 RBC. I think what I have to do is to run them not in parallel, but that would mean some 3 or 4 hours running tests. So, with one of these nights before going to sleep, I remember to return, but otherwise, I'm not read it.
Too, that when it's like unclear where it crashes, and then I have to set the number of tests to 1, and it runs it 1 at a time, and it takes a long time, and then I can see where it hangs or something. But now
here it's not crashing. It's simply silent, nothing, no error, no response, no nothing. I have to kill the window. No, I can do a Control-C, and then I end, but then I have to kill it anyway. So it really something screws the shell by the end of the test. I don't know if it is a particular test who does that or what it is.
When that was happening to me, it was because of the file truncation. So it could be something else like that, where it would enter a recursive, trying to repeatedly truncate the file, and it would always end up in my cache directory. So there might be something like that going on.
Yeah, that's interesting, Joachim. See if you can do some forensics.
It's strange. I know it's always strange because I don't get the same failures as the CI. Yeah. Sometimes some of them I do not, others I do, and the CI does not. And I never understood what is the difference. But I don't reproduce what the CI does for Windows. Never did reproduce.
And these are tiny differences, like hairline.
No, the tests who fail. Some of them was failing in the types of Travis does not matter, and not for me, and the other way around as well. I have the problems with the names. Well, that story of the names that MinW does, and that makes it fail the tests with the custom symbols. Well, I found that Dong Dong had something that in a variable that switched off the conversion of the relative parts or something. So most of them passed, but there are still 1 or 2 who does not pass. So So and every time I see it, I will always have something more pressy or interesting to do. So keep lagging.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you described from the first problem is something probably in W issue and shell. And
yes, but it's not all the shells I have tried on Windows have had one of these type of problems.
Huh.
GitHub shell, it doesn't matter. All of them, in a way or another, had the problem with the process.
Okay.
Strange how it doesn't happen on the Bill Gates machines.
That Bill Gates again. Not only did he messed up all the vaccinations, but now he's doing something with Joachim's computer.
Yeah.
Oh. All right.
Okay.
Moving along on the update. So developer documentation. So if you look at the documentation page for the nightly builds, I guess, you'll see that there is a developer documentation tab or in the sidebar towards the bottom. And I started to populate that with sort of documentation for developers about specific things inside GMT. And the one I added yesterday was this proposed refactoring implementation that we have received funding to do from NSF. We have talked about it at a very high level that this is a good thing and all that stuff. And then once we get into the weeds and the details and how it works, there's a lot of issues that we haven't really discussed that will require discussion. So that's why it's further down on the agenda today. So I won't start that right now, but that's sort of the intent here is that, you know, a lot of the low-level decisions and design and thinking about stuff in GMT, we have bits and pieces of that documentations in a separate repo called the Sandbox. So if you dig around on the GMT organization, you will find the Sandbox repo, and inside there is a folder called Guru Docs, which has bits and pieces of background material, equations, derivations, thinking about some of the algorithms that we did in GMT. And I want to sort of repurpose that into this developer documentation so it is easy to find and you know it's in one place. And so it's not just me having to remember these things. It will be sort of there for everyone else to see and you know, and that's how things can improve. So that's the purpose of that chapter. And
well, I'm looking at the page. I don't see I see the development resources. Well, I read the text directly in the text.
You have to go to the nightly builds, the developer documentation.
Oh yeah, I'm in 6.1 dev. Yeah.
And then it'll be there. We got updated pretty quickly. I checked yesterday.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to that one, but that's where it is. Megan, you want to talk about the how-to guides for 6.3 release?
Yeah, this is a issue that probably has come up before this as well, but the most recent time was back in November. Paul mentioned that it would be particularly helpful to have how-to guides for some of the plot minus S in particular options, because there are many and it comes up frequently on the forum. Federico mentioned that he was interested in helping with that, and I would enjoy working with him on it. The first step is to create a meta how-to guide, which is something that is in other projects' documentation, such that they're relatively consistent and contain the same organization and content. And once that's done, we'll create a set of a plan for what the first set of how-to guides would contain. And this is really just starting now, largely because of the amount of time that went into the NASA proposal. So this is a heads up that this is going to be an ongoing effort that we, I'm sure, welcome more people to work on with us as well. And we'll hopefully have this a good set of them completed for a 6.3 release. Federico, do you want to add anything about what your thoughts were for the how-to guides?
Oh no, I don't. No, nothing else.
Okay, great. I appreciate that, Federico, and the rest. I clearly have reached my bandwidth in what I can juggle at the same time as department chair and GMT developer and many other things. So this is great that Megan can come in and help with push that thing forward, because I know many of you have asked to help with documentations, and I'm willing, but I haven't followed up very well because of being swamped with stuff. So this is good. This will be a good avenue for all of us to improve the documentation, which we all agree is definitely needed. So that's all good.
I was in contact with Federico outside of the GMT universe, and we talked about how to improve the documentation on our own, basically. And we came to the conclusion it would be very helpful just on the one side have the starter how-tos, as you're planning to do, and on the other side have more examples for all the options that are hidden, like behind B, minus B, and all that stuff. And I would volunteer as well to help on that one.
Yeah, that's great. It's nice that there's multiple paths converging on the same ideas. That was actually one of the main points that went into the NASA proposal, is having more examples, having them reproducible such that they use remote files and have visual outputs using the Sphinx extension that Dongdong and Joachim created. So I think we're all in agreement with you on that one, and it'd be great if you're interested in working on it.
Yeah, writing the NASA proposal was interesting because given that they have the NSF funding, we had to be very careful how we worded things and what we said would be done differently and stuff, because we definitely did not, we went to great length to point out we were not double dipping, we were doing different things that were not covered at all by NSF, and that's essential. So hopefully those arguments are found believable because they are truthful, but we don't know how the review process will go. So it's like any other review, you just don't know until you find out. Okay, so that was sort of the update of what's happening. And as I said, the last month has been a little bit slow. Well, we had the holidays, which slows things down normally, and then we had the proposal that took up a lot of time. All right, so the next thing on the agenda is deciding on the 6.2 release date. So this mythical release that has been talked about for months, at some point it has to actually happen. And nothing helps that better than to have a date and a deadline, because that sort of pushes things. We all respond to deadlines, but if it's sort of sometime in the spring, it's unclear when that is. So the key thing that will go into 6.2, I believe, is the GMT themes. I don't think there's any major, other than normal cast of bugs that we would like to fix. That is the key thing.
Isn't the 3D grids, wasn't that at some point between 6.1 and 6.2?
Oh,
that seems large to me.
Yeah, I've forgotten about that already. Yes, there's several new things in 6.2 from 6.1. We have the LaTeX equations for annotations. We have 3D grids, interpolations, and output. There's probably other things. We tend to have trouble listing all the things because we forget them, and we don't have a great change log. We'll scramble a change log from the Git logs, and when we make the official release, it will have a list of all the new things. There's quite a few because it's been a while since 6.1. But the bulk are fixing problems, improving things, that sort of thing. Plus these new, and it's just the GMT theme is a sort of a big headliner that will come out there that people will really notice.
And contacted the people from USGS about the shake map. Right. Well, did you get a reply from them?
Yeah, I got one reply a while ago about.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was the only one that we got. So they reply after some days and saying that, well, in an English expression that I didn't completely fully understand, but they say, okay, we don't know what to do with our stuff. Your proposal is very interesting. We're going to discuss more, and next week we'll say something. Yeah. Maybe next week is next week. We didn't hear anything.
Yeah, that's getting the holidays, over there. Yeah, I should dig up that email trail. What we learned is that their latest release of Shake Map is all moved to the web, I think, and they're not using GMT as much on the front end. So it was.
They don't use it at all.
Yeah. Okay. So there was, big changes there. So.
Okay. They don't use for Shake Map, but they still use the grids.
Yeah.
Yes, the grids, and that's where well, I wrote is significantly easier, at least, to use than what they have. And apparently they still use that thing to produce the grids. So they should be interested, but they said they were, and not that much to push them to reply.
Yeah, so we'll try to follow up on that, and depending on it doesn't sound like that can be ready in a hurry. That's my guess. So
no.
It may not be 6.2.
It's just for me. It's boring. I have to make my installer from that branch because I want to have it in the version of GMT that one of the installers that are produced, one that has the MVCs and things like that. It also has the shape. So once it still lives in a branch, it's more boring. Otherwise, it would just be
sure
automatically.
Yeah. Let's follow up on the Use.js reply and see what they said and decide how we should respond to it, and see if we can get some, something more out of them than that they're interested. All right, so it's release dates. I'm going to propose February 15th. I don't know. What do you think? Can we do that? It's a goal. We don't have to announce it that it will happen, but that's our internal goal. No shaking heads. Is that a yes?
Yes, it's that. Yes, I was thinking if you wanted to do it right now, we wouldn't because of the theme, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, would be put the engines on run.
I think it would.
So, we should release it because it was quite some time. We released the other one.
All right, so I will say February 15th, but we aren't able to do that, right? And it's not like it's cast in iron, we'll release regardless. It has to be ready, but I think that is a doable deadline until proven otherwise. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Outreachy Internship, which has a link. Megan, you want to talk about that?
That was Ouiji's idea. So if you want to introduce it, you're welcome to.
That was actually Leo's idea, but yeah. So Outreachy, let me try and remember. So it's an internship program which funds sort of like a diverse. So it's an internship program, I think, based in the US, which is meant to fund developers that don't normally look like developers, basically. So underrepresented people and groups. And the idea is that you have a mentor who, so you get a mentor and he or she would then teach like someone who's not so familiar with like the coding stuff, and for a few months, and basically sort of set up like someone bring someone up to speed on like development, like coding and stuff. Sorry, my brain's not awake yet.
Sorry for putting you on the spot. I wasn't. Didn't want to.
I think Megan, you probably read it a bit more.
Yeah. Possibly, unfortunately, I read the details after we had already submitted the NASA proposal. The structure seems to be that there's, in order to have intern through this program, you need to be part of a community, and in order to be, and we don't necessarily fit within the existing communities, so the solution would be to create our own community, and in order to create your own community, you need $6,500 at least to support one intern. $5,500 goes to the intern over the 3-month internship. $500 is for the intern to have travel support, and the remaining $500 goes towards Outreachy's, I guess, infrastructure. So it seems like, my opinion is that it seems like a great program. We just have to find a way to support the funding, right? So that's one of the reasons why it's good to bring this up to the team in this community meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of like Google Summer of Code, but more for like a diverse group of people. And I'm not sure. Yeah, just funding probably for getting the mentor, the mentor to attend like a conference or something at some point to present what they learned or what they did. And yeah.
Yeah, so it seems, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, so $6,500. So I'll have to look at the budgets we have, since this is, money that didn't have these things in them. So we'll see if we can scramble $6,500 out of the existing budget. I mean, the NSF budget has a lot of money, so it's a question of what's allowable in that budget. So I can look at that and report back to you guys. It doesn't sound like this is too hard to get done. I'm positive that we can probably do something like that. There's some deadline.
Yeah, there's a spring call and a fall call. I think that it's probably more realistic to go for the fall. The spring, I think, is the mentor side is due, I think, February 15th, and we would have to become a community in advance of that, whereas September would be somewhere in August or September would be establishing a community. Though if someone wants to really go full steam ahead for February, I wouldn't say they shouldn't.
I see. So establishing the community, what exactly is involved?
Sorry, are we talking about Summer of Code or not?
No, this is Outreachy. So I think establishing a community, that's probably like part of the application process. Okay. You just have to show, like from my understanding, you just have to show that you've got someone to mentor, basically.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably doable.
Maybe it's a bit convoluted than that, but yeah.
All right, so maybe you will take upon yourself to learn what ropes we have to learn to do this, and then you and I can chat about the process, and then once we understand what's involved, we can decide the timeline.
Yep, that sounds good. For a mentoring perspective, I imagine that we'll probably have several people who are interested. I'd be happy to help out on the September timeline after I get more involved in PyGMT, but don't think that a month from now I would be ready to mentor anyone on PyGMT development. Right.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's great. So I think that's a good path for us to do. Too bad we didn't include that in the NASA proposal, but hey, there's always something that we learn. It's me. All right. Any other comments on that? Should we move on? So the next one is the refactoring plan. And it's a little unfortunate that Leo couldn't make it today. But it's something that I think we have to have a discussion among the developers on how we can actually do the refactoring, because it is several key issues that doesn't have an obvious answer to me. So what we're talking about is, I try to explain in my words what this is about, and that's in that developer documentation proposed refactoring implementation. And excuse me, it's early here, but not enough coffee. So I don't know if anyone has had time to read my descriptions of the problem and what the tasks might be involved there. But we're looking at, creating a second interface to GMT, basically, with a different set of functions that do not take command line arguments or virtual files, which is what the current API does, right? So the current API was born out of the old executables, and all the old executables read data, processed options, did things, and wrote out results, right? So everything had IO and calculations in the same program. These programs were turned into functions, but essentially they kept their whole modus operandi, right? Each of the functions are still reading data, doing stuff, writing stuff out. And that's kind of unusual for a library, if you will, that's going to do calculations. it gets a little bit more nebulous with plotting, because plotting is a multi-layer thing and it goes on for many modules, right? But for calculations, if you think of gridding X, Y, Z data to give a grid, it's easy to imagine a function that takes X, Y, and Z vectors, does the gridding, and returns an array or a matrix out the interface of that thing. And there's no I/O at all, because that's happened outside, right? So if you're in Python or MATLAB or Julia or R or something like that, you have your data already in memory. You just want to grid it, right? There's no file at that point. So what does that interface look like? And that's what brings up, you know, a lot of issues. So this is something that we have been funded to do based on the very high level premise that this is a useful thing to do and it will simplify wrapping. I'm not yet entirely sure if it really is true that this will simplify wrapping or not. It will certainly create a lot of work for us to do. So activity is good, I guess, but it is still tricky because you kind of come up with a way to pass the information that each module needs somehow in a simple manner. And we have to decide how the data goes in and out of these functions. So I'm not sure if you're ready to have this kind of technical discussion, but that's sort of what I see as we got to decide this before we start coding anything, right? We can't code out a plan because this affects hundreds of modules, and we don't want to redo things. And it is entirely tied into, you know, how we handle options, the long options proposal, how the parsing of options happens. We don't want to write new parsers for new ways of receiving information into those new functions. It would be a lot of work. So I guess I'll leave it at that for now. That's sort of where my thinking is. It's evolving. There's some questions in here that I haven't answered myself, at least so I know for sure. But and also the way I look at the whole GMT ecosystem, you know, when we include the wrappers in the different languages, there are some things that are relatively common across all languages, and others are not. And then there's what the limitations of what C can do, right? So my hope was that the C library would do all the things that it can do that is beneficial to all the wrappers in a systematic manner. And then there will be, you know, language specific things that has to be done the way it should be done in that language. You can't help that, right? But the base should be that anything that's common and simple and should be uniform should happen in the C library. And anyone have comments on any of this at this point? I mean, I didn't give people much time to digest this, so I don't really expect to have a huge in-depth thing here. We will probably set up a discussion tab on GitHub, Megan, or should we do this on Slack, or how should we do this? We can't just have this once a month and have a chat, right? We got to continuously push this kind of issue and see what the problems are that we need to tackle.
My opinion would be that starting the GitHub discussions tab would be really helpful. I have a list of issues that reference anything related to long options. There really haven't been any for the broader refactoring yet, but I'm sure that those will start coming up. So that seems like a better, more appropriate space for these types of discussions to me, rather than the issues or the forum.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a very verbal kind of problem. You know, you kind of have to look at lines maybe and pictures or something like that to explain what the thinking is. And that's hard to do in a Zoom. Well, harder to do in a Zoom. So we're all for having a discussion tab on GitHub then.
Yeah. I think. But on the particular subject, I think at this moment, we would need more income from the Pi side, what they see that is beneficial, your proposal.
Yeah, I know.
Regarding comparing to what it exists already right now, is it going to be drop it and replace it by that? Well, because I talked with Paul about this, and even for the MATLAB side, I think for the MATLAB side we could do it only in MATLAB if you wanted, the kind of modern mode and long verbose. I think you could do that just in MATLAB, or it can be done in C. From Julia, honestly, I have no interest on that. It's more restrictive, more work, and it's already done. So I will be assisting and giving you opinions, but from the Python side, I don't know, and that's, I think, where we basically need more detailed input if they see useful. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Is there like a? I read through that document you had briefly, Paul. And I think you mentioned, was it block mean, block median were like listed as your examples. So is there like a list of initial things we want to refactor? No. Other than like the obvious ones?
No, I think this is part of the lack of planning on this, right? So I think, to me, the refactoring, if we do it along these lines, makes most sense to the modules that compute things, not the plotting thing. Plotting have, yeah. So almost all
the data processing ones.
Yeah, so surface, block mean, any ones that doesn't plot basically are potentially functions that compute things and returns results. I think those are the ones that would be targeted for refactoring, if any.
No.
Okay.
Well,
and
if you
like
want to do
core...
plots.
Oops. Yeah. You
go on.
What do you want to say?
No, quickly. If you want to do plots, you also have to transmit the grids. So it's about the same thing as with the calculus. I don't see so much division between plotting and calculation. I think it's just more or less the same thing.
Oh, the input side, yeah. The output side.
Since I interrupted, Luigi, the record by records is a bit of a separate thing. It affects all entire GMT. So
okay, so the memory issue.
It came together, but it's something that really horizontal to all the GMT users, the wrappers as well. But there is the other one is how to transmit the options and the data to the models, and that's one part of it's the major part of what Paul has in the document.
Okay. Because my impression of like reading that document was that this refactoring, there might be a risk where like really large data sets might not run anymore because of this like record by record, the way the record by record processing would work.
I will continue adding more text to this thing and look at classes of modules, I think. But in the example I brought up is it's an actual real example where we need a capacity to handle a very large data set. So it's like, we don't want to break that one case, but also it is, 0.001% of GMT users who will be in that situation with a billion data points, right? So it's just not a typical thing. And with that drives our design, it's still crazy. So maybe this is a corner, but an exceptional thing where we do something separate for this module. We make some module that works the current way, but then we have another one that works with memory. I think we can't just be driven by this crazy thing. It's kind of useful.
I agree. Okay. Is there anything else on Downtown? Anything? You might be a bit more familiar with what's happening. I've been a bit in and out lately.
Yeah.
On how like this refactoring might affect PyGMT.
Yeah, I just read the definition, and I think it's so you are trying to use the long options, long form arguments to in the refactoring functions. I don't think we'll use this in PyGMT because if we use the long form arguments, then we have to translate the PyGMT arguments to the C arguments. I believe it's not easy to do.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree that for these functions, it will be easier for C users to call the GMT library, GMT functions, but for PyGMT, it may be easier for us to pass data in or out to GMT. But we probably won't use the dictionaries or the long form options.
So currently, I think this is similar to what Working does. You are processing the keyword argument, and you are translating this into a GMT command line string, and ultimately call GMT call module with the command line string. So is it fair to say what you said is, if there was an alternative interface that would take the command line strings, but also arguments for IO, that might be more appealing to PyGMT, where you're just sort of separating out the input-output from the command string, basically?
Yes, at least it's better to me. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we should get that discussion going on GitHub. We will get Leo's point, since he was sort of one of the big advocates for pushing refactoring. I think he needs to defend himself and explain. He might see this differently, right? And how he envisioned this to happen. So we need to get that feedback, I think.
Just have one comment. This seems to be a bit about the implementation of the use of long options. I think another complementary decision to be made is whether there's consensus that PyGMT, GMT MATLAB, GMT, and depending on Joachim's plan, that Julia wrappers should all even use the same names for modules. Obviously, that would be a requisite step for having some sort of dictionary that is called from GMT, but regardless of whether the implementation is the same or different, having some sort of consensus on whether just the names of the long options should be the same would be helpful.
Yeah, so in PyGMT, we've actually been copying most of GMT Julia's long options, so the long names, except in cases where I think there was one case where we had a reserved word in Python which we can't use.
Yeah. I remember. Don't remember the case, but I remember.
I can't remember. I think it was like range or something, which was like a reserved word in Python.
Probably.
Probably shouldn't be like a, yeah. But other than that, we've mostly been following GMT Julia's lead on this. So there's probably not too many differences.
That's great.
But there's also a thing where in GMT Julia, you can have like more than one long option for one short option. So it's like a one-to-many thing. But in Python, we sort of just stick to one. There's probably a way to do two, but for simplicity in PyGMT, we just stuck to like a one-to-one mapping. So there might be, we might need to consolidate some of that.
Yes, there are several cases more than one because I hesitated. And if you see most of the cases where more than one is when you have two words. So should you stack the two words together or put a underscore between them? Should you use single or plural? And since I never remember, I hope that it works for me when I don't remember. So because it's easy for me to add more, so I have more. But sometimes I think, well, it would be better to have just one. But because I had to name so many, that's the most boring thing of doing a wrapper for another model. I have to read the manual and decide for it.
Naming things is not
really that's really awful. So many times, well, I don't know, I put two. So that's the reason for every. Sometimes it's the reason for every many. And also should it be a single words or separated with the underscore?
Yeah. So it is what it is, right? So we can't go back to square one and start over and make a table of everybody agreeing on these things. So I guess pragmatically, what you guys are doing is not bad. That since Joachim has gone ahead and made lots of keywords to many modules, as long as there's nothing crazy with those choices, that PyGMT follows that, right? And then at least have that consistency. And but what that does is that sort of ties my hands, right, to when we do the long option in C. I have to sort of follow you instead of having some sort of process where we agree on what is the most suitable, the best thing. So it's a little funny design in that sense, but I guess there's no good alternative to this. Joachim is not going to start over. I know that's not going to happen. And you guys already made the decision. So I think we should just be aware of this, that we kind of want to have the same keywords in the different languages, right? To the extent possible, that it's not switching between, running a module in Julia and Python shouldn't have vastly different keywords. That would be unfortunate, I think.
I just recently renamed in-call to in-calls and out-call to out-calls because they are not much used. It's not yet 1.0, so I did. And I added X shift like you have in Python. That I just added. It's one more. So
right.
So it also
So just on that, the in-call and in-calls, I think Dong and I sort of agreed that we should stick to singular rather than just because it's shorter. And I think that was like another good reason. So stick to singular long options rather than plural. So without the S, like size instead of sizes. I think that was a good reason for that, Dong. Other than just being shorter.
Yeah, I think we agree. I mean, Luigi and I agree that we should use singles because, we can use plot to plot some circles, and the size can be we can have a single size for all the circles, so it's make more sense to use size. And if we have circles with different size, then it's more complicated. But to keep but it's a vector, just a size vector, so it also makes sense to use single. Yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting. So if you can look at the developer guide and the long option proposal, towards the bottom, I have a big table for the common GMT options and the proposed long option names for the C interface. And I have a few plurals there. So you're arguing we should not have the plurals there. So it's the in calls and out columns, right? In rows, out rows, keep rows, call types. These are all plural words that I put in. That's made sense to me, but so you will see that we should.
Or should probably stick with cores.
Well, cores is different, right? I mean.
Yeah, it was a joke.
I guess it's not a hard and fast rule. I guess it just depends on the context matters.
And that but this is the kind of stuff we should agree on, right? So you don't find ourselves down the road that it actually is an S in this one language and no S in the other one, and it's just I said a decision that really should have been nipped in the bud a long time ago. So I'm not wedded to any of these words, right? So if this is not released, it can change today.
But I always have problems with the rule with this type of rules. For example, the sticking with the underscore or not underscore. Okay, it's fine when the two words are small. It's not fine when the two words are big.
Yeah.
This case of the plural and the singular, there are cases where the plural is much more intuitive for us to remember. So I have to say it's always singular or it's always plural, or it's always sticky or it is always separate. But I have these difficulties with this following one rule and then seeing that rule not being, in that case, nobody doesn't work well with this.
The fun thing here, because is that we are a whole bunch, apart from Megan, all of us are in non-English.
Yes, yeah, that also matters. Because
it's kind of stupid, right? It's like, so you have authority to tell us, the English language, this is what it should be, just slap our faces around because we're kind of making these things up. And
yeah, the counter to that is that there's so many users who are non-native speakers that it might be your opinions are way more valuable than mine, because it's what needs to make sense to the most amount of people.
We can all be wrong together, you mean? I do like the thought of having this done, in a good syntactic manner that makes sense, linguistically, I guess, to the extent possible. But I don't know if, I was thinking, this is my thinking, that when you use the in rows or in columns, you aren't picking one column. GMT can't really function with one column for almost all the modules. So it seemed like you would pick more than one, and therefore I picked Perl. That was my thinking. But you can pick one. So then it looks weird to say in calls equals one, right? So, come on.
Yeah. Oh, just a shout out to Will, who's our new PyGMT maintainer. I think he, on that note, you recently wrapped like one of the GMT codes aliases, and you decided on DCW instead of for the -E.
Yeah, I originally called it Paint Country. It was a pretty ugly name, and Don corrected me and said Julia uses DCW.
Okay, I will. Good to have you on board. Do you want to give us a 30-second blurb about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm not an academic. I got my bachelor's in geology. I worked with Karen Harp and Dennis Geist at Colgate University. Actually, I went to the Galapagos and with Eric Middlestead, Adam Sewell was there, Dan Fernari. So it's interesting following them. After college, I joined the Air Force, and I recently separated from that this past summer. And I got married, and I'm now a military spouse full time. So I moved to England with my wife, and I work as a defense contractor. And I've kind of gotten into Python over the last few years, and I was casually surfing the internet, and I was thinking about GMT, and I was like, I wonder if they have a Python one, and found Liam Tony's video, and a few months later, here I am.
That's fantastic. That's great. That's great. And that's funny that, we all know the same people. I know Dennis well. So it's a small world,
Yes.
The GMT world. Great. Fantastic. So let's see here. So we went through the official agenda, Megan. Is there anything else that we should take up time with? We are pushing 55 minutes. We try to keep it an hour to not bore people out of their skulls, because Zooms are tedious things and we do them all the time. But in terms of action, I guess action items coming forward is the themes branch, to work on that, of course. Set up the GitHub discussion tab so we can start having technical discussions about some of these thorny issues that we have to tackle going forward. Let's see, other actions we have to do. Well, there's actions related to, the how-to guides, of course. And then we have the deadline of 6.2. I guess, Dongnan, we should open a checklist at some point for that. Anyone want to bring up anything at the end here? So forum is open.
I'm replying to Vladimir asking something.
Just on the 6.2, I had some issues with sorting out GDAL. What is 6.2 require GDAL 3.1 as minimum, or does it not matter?
Oh.
No.
Joachim, do you know? I don't think.
Sorry, I'll get back in a moment. 2 words.
In middle of typing.
Yeah, to Vladimir.
GDAL that we have any version requirements for, as far as I'm concerned. Joachim is the one who's closest to the GDAL.
Okay, sorry, I was hearing only one side of that. Please. You are asking if there is any of the questions?
Yeah, was there anything with GMT 6.2? Will GMT 6.2 require like a minimum GDAL version or something? I think there was something on you mentioned that.
No.
Yeah, so it's just going to work with GDAL 3.1
yes.
and then
the dependencies exist.
Okay.
are not used is the OGR read needs GDAL 2.0, not 3.
Okay.
That is being used so far only by Julia, but that's the only thing. The other things, if you don't have the drivers, there are rasters or formats that you cannot access. I don't think there is anything. What I saw, I don't know. It's following that. You see in the MB list, apparently Homebrew had break something with the GDAL because it installs I don't understand. Boost TCLTK, and it was in TCLTK they introduced some incompatibility with X11. So they installed all of that shit in GDAL. So it's awful. So they added the problem in MB system. They could not install in MB system until they've made some private formula for the people there. So I was surprised that, because from the description, it would seem something that would affect GMT as well, because Homebrew puts everything in GDAL. This apparently there is no end of what you can put inside it. But we don't have, aside from the OGR read, and that's only 2.0, we don't have anything specific. No problem with one or the others. Just you have more or less depending on the age of your library installation.
And there was a thing on GhostScript where I had like a friend who tried to install GMT the other day and had a problem with GhostScript.
Maybe because GhostScript on
6.2, yeah. Occasion, yeah. It was like
they can call X11, and then you are on.
Well, that's if you run GS.
But there was a thing.
We'll try to open up X11 windows, but the way we run it, we specify the device in an output file or something. So there shouldn't be any X11 things in there. So that's, so I don't know exactly what that problem was. Was it, opening up the PostScript plot at the end with GMT end show or something? Because that will definitely call Ghost View, which will probably rely on X11, which.
On X11, yes.
That's all I can guess. But I saw that message, but I wasn't clear the context, I guess. What command was run? Because psconvert doesn't touch X11, select specific drivers. Yeah. Maybe get some more information on that one, so see if it can be reproduced. We can have a look.
Yeah.
All right. At the end of the hour. Yes, we are.
One more thing. What kind of channel for discussions about the how-tos and the, let's say, the examples for the options and all that stuff we were talking about earlier shall we use for communication? Shall we go to the forum for that, or the GitHub issues? It's maybe not the perfect place for that. Do you have any recommendations on this?
No, I don't have
forum for so far.
Once the GitHub
once we don't
open.
And well, I would like to keep the issues for more focused things on the GMT itself. I think the forum is fine for that. But if you are going to have the discussions tab on GitHub, then yes. But if you want to start something, for me, anything that is discussion is preferably the forum and not issues. The issues are for discussing particular issue.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, Christoph. I'm not familiar with the GitHub discussion tab and what it looks like. If it looks like another kind of issues thing where you add topics, then that's probably a good place to. Yeah. Okay, folks, thanks for participating. This recording will be posted on YouTube at some point. I have a busy morning after this, so it will take a few hours to get to that stuff, but it will get up there, and also the notes will be up on the forum, I think. So thanks everybody. Stay well, and we'll see you in about a month.